Welcome back, Keller Williams. My name is Matt Teter. I'm the Director of Leadership Coaches for MAPS Coaching, and I'm here with Marcus Green. Marcus, could you introduce yourself?
Yeah, absolutely. Good morning, everyone. I'm Marcus Green. I'm an operating principal and an owner in 3 market centers in the great state of Utah, and also have a team running out of Arizona.
Well, that's the reason why we have you here, Marcus, to talk about this, because with all of those people that you have in your market centers, in the past experience that you've had in multiple leadership roles, what you do right now as an operating principal, and who you hire into your sales team, there's this thing called the people assessment that we have now. We're going to talk about today, and I'm sure it's been very powerful for you and in simplifying the conversation and getting into business with talent.
Oh yeah, the people assessment is one of my favorite conversations. To me, this is the great connectivity between people, is this conversation we're going to go over today.
Excellent. Well, let's jump into it. We're just going to take a moment here. I'm going to share my screen, make sure that this all works, and we'll get into the presenter mode here. So let's go ahead and present this out. Okay, Marcus, is that working on? Oh, my apologies. Is that working on your end?
Looks good to me.
Okay, excellent. Well, we already covered that. We're going to talk about the people assessment. So let's dive in. So, Marcus, how do you prepare for a consulting conversation?
I think this is a great question, and I think it takes a completely different mindset to prepare for a consulting conversation as opposed to the old guard, which is that old recruiting presentation. And just the idea of going from a presentation to a consultation takes a new level of leadership, and a new level of leadership, I think, takes a different mindset. Makes me think of the old saying we all know that when a student is ready, a teacher will appear. And a synonym of a teacher is a leader, a guide, a consultant. And we always look at that statement from the student's perspective of some teacher magically appears when that student's ready. But this group we're talking to today really needs to look at that statement from the other side of the equation of that teacher just didn't magically appear. That consultant didn't magically appear. There was a lot of preparation that went into preparing to show up at the right time for that student. And I think that's the mindset we need to take into this. Is there are people out there probably now more than ever that are looking for guidance, looking for some coaching and consulting. They want to get to the next level. The path to get there is more unclear to them than it's ever been, which creates a huge opportunity for us to show up knowing that, hey, someone out there needs me today. Now it's just a matter of getting in front of that right person with the right message today.
So, Marcus, I heard a lot of things in there. Obviously, what we're talking about in the people assessment today is the concept of success through others. It's the concept of finding the who, right? When you think about building an organizational model, which is also one of the fundamental models of the MREA. And so if we keep things simple, right, you also talked about preparation. And so how do you prepare for a conversation like this? It seems to me that one thing that we would do is we would make sure that we understand the organizational model of the MREA, right? We'd understand the updated, and we're going to talk about this today, the 7th level model that's been updated for the MREA 2nd edition and what that looks like. We'd also review the resources that Jason Abrams and KWU have provided us right on kwconnect.com in those phenomenal videos and those downloads and those tools. Is there anything else when you think about preparation for a consulting conversation that you think about that's important for you?
Yeah, I'm glad you brought up the resources. I mean, Jason Abrams has done a phenomenal job of modeling this for us, but the model alone isn't enough. To me, it's also about the practice, right? We want to show up in that conversation in the moment that agent, whether it's an agent inside of KW or an agent that we're introducing to KW, is we need to be showing up with our A game in that moment and not practicing on them. So I would say not only knowing the models and knowing those resources, but practicing them. The other side of that I think we'd be remiss not to talk about is identifying up front those limiting beliefs that a lot of us have of what is standing in the way of us showing up with our A game for the right person at the right time.
Absolutely. And I want to take a look at making sure that we go into that. So let's talk about limiting beliefs, Marcus. What are some of the limiting beliefs that may hold somebody back from having a consulting conversation like this one?
Yeah, I mean, I kind of thought back at my earlier days of recruiting and into business and identified some of the limiting beliefs that I had at that time. And And to be honest, sometimes they still creep in, right? Those limiting beliefs, if we're not actively staying in front of them, they constantly creep in. And I think a lot of leaders within our organization can resonate that. I think some of the primary limiting beliefs that we struggle with is, man, this person that I'm reaching out to, or this agent that I want to get in business with, has accomplished so much more than I have. Their Facebook profile shows that they're so happy and crushing it, and they're doing everything at a high level, that they're going to instantly push back and not be open to the conversation that I'm bringing to the table. So I think that's one of the primary limiting beliefs that a lot of us face, is thinking, oh man, this person isn't ready for the message, or doesn't want to hear this message today.
Okay, so do we have the level of understanding? Do we have the level of business acumen or knowledge to be able to connect with that person, right? Or that style conversation that we're having is one. Another one is, does this person want to have this conversation, right? Or do they want to go into this in-depth conversation, right? Let's talk about maybe the different levels of the conversation and talk about how beliefs could show up differently. So there's a preparing for an internal conversation with the Keller Williams agent, right? A top 20% agent or an ALC member. And there's preparing for an external conversation. So are there different limiting beliefs that could exist having an internal consulting conversation versus having an external consulting or recruiting conversation?
Yeah, I believe so. I mean, I believe there is some similarities, but there's also some differences. I mean, one of the things that Jason Abrams keeps hitting home on right now is, it's not just recruiting people outside of our organization, but it's re-recruiting the people within our organization. So in that element, it is the same. And a lot of times our top people are so busy that they're not the squeaky wheel, that we think they've already got the tools that they need. So in regards to the preparation, is identifying who needs the conversation, understanding where they're at in their business. We're constantly pulling broker metrics report and looking at their multi-year trend reports, because if we don't understand the ins and outs of their business, we can't come to the table, ask the right questions to get them open to the conversation of knowing where they want to go.
Okay, great. So here's what I'm writing down for your preparation. And the question that comes after, what limiting beliefs would you have, would be, how do you overcome them? So one thing that you overcome those limiting beliefs with is that preparation, right? And when you look at that preparation, just going back to it, it's knowing your numbers, right? Number one, it's understanding what numbers they have. Number two, what you've talked about is you've talked about the models of the MREA, right? The fundamental models that our real estate business and that our company builds businesses on. Specifically in this conversation, the organizational model, right? And you need to have an understanding of all of them to see how it plays a role in their economic model, what shows up in their budget and what they can afford, right, to be able to do that, right? Who's going to take what responsibilities in lead generation, so you can ask other powerful questions, right? You also talked about preparing with these assessments, right? Or these consulting conversations based on what's on kwconnect.com, right? And that preparation overall is going to help overcome those limiting beliefs of, can I provide value to this individual internally, right? Am I prepared to be able to help them do that? Maybe the limiting belief of, I haven't made a hire myself. How can I consult somebody through this process, right? Of making that decision where they're going to put out money. They're going to pay somebody a salary to bring somebody inside the organization. And if I haven't done those things, do I feel confident consulting somebody to take that on themselves?
Yeah, I think that's beautifully said. And particularly that last point, I was in a conversation with one of the leaders within my organization a couple of weeks ago, and they brought up a limiting belief that I didn't identify, which I should have as the leader. I should have saw that earlier on. And that was the question of, I don't know if I'm a strong enough leader right now that my people need. And so part of that, I think that is another limiting belief. A lot of particular leaders within our organization right now is, we know the level of leadership has to be, that bar has been raised. And it has a lot of people questioning, like, am I a good enough leader to be able to lead in this new economic landscape? And obviously that opened up some great conversations of how to grow our leadership with that specific leader within my organization.
Okay, so now you're saying another way to overcome limiting beliefs is connecting with other powerful leaders, right? And having conversations with role play partners, accountability partners, or other leaders, right? For these style conversations, so you're more confident, and to be able to share some of those limiting beliefs and understand how they overcame them as well themselves. That's really interesting to hear. That is another technique to overcome that and move forward. when we think about working with a recruiter, somebody outside Keller Williams, could a limiting belief also be whether or not this conversation is important, or how do I know whether or not this conversation is meaningful? What questions do I ask to get to that? Or I don't think I know how to position this conversation in a way where it can be powerful or impactful for a recruit. Does that ever come up?
Oh, I think that's such an important part, and it's a skill set to know how to ask those questions, because it on our side, it's so clear to us. The models have been outlined in such a way that we see a clear path to people achieving life at any level they want to. Outside of our organization, it's not as clear to them as it is to us. And if we just show up to say, hey, everything you're doing is wrong, here is the path, they're instantly going to push back on that conversation. Mm-hmm. But what we need to do is get clarity on what path they're on and why they're making the decisions they're making before we can overlap our model with their current structure, their current reality. Okay. If we don't do a good enough job of getting clarity on what their life looks like now, what they're trying to achieve, the strategies they're implementing to get there, we in essence aren't showing up as a consultant. We're going back into presentation mode, and presentation mode in today's landscape, and from my perspective, offers pushback from that person.
Okay, great. So here's what you're saying. The preparation and the mindset that you go into in the recruiting side could be the mindset, this recruit is mine if I choose, right? Or if I choose to be in business with this person, right, that's what's going to occur, right? Something in that affirmation-based communication. And then the preparation is similar. And yet I heard some additional things. You've got to know your numbers. You've got to know their numbers. You've got to understand the MREA fundamental models, right? The assessments, these consulting conversations we're talking about, connecting with other leaders to role play, overcome objections, to inspect those limiting beliefs, and then tackling a needs analysis, understanding where the conversation falls into a needs analysis and how to execute from there. Is that right?
Yeah, beautifully said. Like, if we don't do a good job of following that path you just outlined and getting clarity on what is the current need, we don't know how to consult. It's right. Getting clarity on that needs before we can consult to the need. And that's why it's so beautiful. The 5 consultations that we've outlined now is our part of our growth initiative. It's really asking questions to identify where to begin the process.
Great. So Marcus, you and I both are communicating live here, and people that are watching this live can jump on Slido. They can ask questions. They can share limiting beliefs. So I know you're going to be monitoring that while you're operating as our expert. I'm running the control panel. We got a lot of things that are happening right in this digital world that's physically enhanced, as Gary says. So we're going to keep moving forward. And yet, if you're watching live and you're saying, hey, you touched on some limiting beliefs, not mine, go ahead and throw it in the chat box, right? Excuse me, or ask a question in Slido, please, right? So we can make sure we address that, and together we can find a way to help you move forward through that. Or if you've got a question or something that you want to have addressed in this conversation, or you just want to make a comment where you agree, put it into Slido so we can see that. So let's keep moving forward here, Marcus, right? The next concept is, that we're going to make the call. Right. And we're preparing ourselves with scripts to invite agents into a consulting conversation. So obviously we're talking about the people assessment or the people conversation of these 5 consulting conversations, which is really based on the organizational model that we'll get to in just a minute. Right. So let's talk about making the call internally first, right, to our roster of agents inside Keller Williams. What does that sound like? Right? To set up a conversation where you're going to go through and consult them on their business and really talk about the organizational model. What would that sound like, Marcus?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. And one of the things that I teach leaders within my organization is we always talk about retention calls and connecting with people, but we have to have a preset objective for every time we reach out. What is the purpose of our call today? Sometimes those calls are just as easy as an invite to a class or a social event, but a lot of times we've got to take that conversation deeper to create the platform to have these specific consulting conversations. And I think one of the things we have to be aware of, if we're just asking questions like, hey, is there anything I can do to support your business right now? It's the same thing when someone walks into Nordstrom right now and someone walks up and says, can I help you find anything? We're preconditioned to say, no, we're good, we're fine. Mm-hmm. And I think our top people within our organization are preconditioned. If we ask the wrong question, we feel like we're asking the right question to say, Is there anything we can do to help? They're preconditioned to say, no, we're good. Thanks. We'll let you know. And we pat ourselves on the back like, oh, I did my job. I asked them the question, and they might have an underlying issue. They just don't know how to ask the question. So particularly right now, I think we need to do a better job of going 2-3 deep in those conversations.
Okay.
To promote them to move forward, say, actually, yes, I do need some help with that.
Okay.
Some suggestions around that are before we're making those calls, if our preset objective is to open the conversation for one of these consultations, specifically the people assessment, is again, knowing their numbers, pulling their broker metrics, looking at their multi-year trend report, and always opening with some positives within their multi-year trend report. Hey, Matt, congratulations. This is the 3rd month in a row you've closed over $1 million a month. That's the first time you've done this within your business. Congratulations on that. That way they get to lean into that and identify that there's some positivity there. Then we can identify, just ask them some further questions. Hey, I know that closing consistently over $1 million a month offers some new challenges within your business. Tell me a little bit about that new friction you're feeling in your business with that newfound success.
Yeah, if one of the biggest things is there's going to come a point in the future where I'm not going to be able to do it all.
Yeah. So I assume that you want to keep this pattern going of consistently closing over $1 million a month to hit your goals, right?
Oh yeah. I mean, the goals that we talked about together are more than $12 million in closed volume this year. So not only do I need to stay on this path, I actually need to do more.
Yeah. And Matt, I believe you can do it. And I think you showed up as a leader there in your conversation saying that you identified that for you to continue to be able to do this, there needs to be some extra things happening within your world, which shows me as a leader, as your coach and consultant, it's time for us to reconnect and look at your organizational chart, analyze your business together to see what the next steps would be to help you continue to do this and more without giving up the other important things in your life, like your family. And I know you like to run and doing those things.
Yeah.
Would you be able to meet later this week for us to talk through that?
Yeah, I'd love to talk about that.
And I think I fall into this trap as well. A lot of times we go in and try to fix the problem in that initial conversation. When really here we're just trying to identify, hey, a new conversation is needed between us. Let's set that up, set the stage for it. And for me, that was enough of a conversation to say, hey, let's get together and identify what needs to happen next, which opens that door for the people assessment or the organizational chart conversation.
Marcus, that's so well handled, and that's such a great example of an internal conversation. In coaching, we always think about questions, right? And so one of the ways when you want to build a script, right? And I'm really looking to take apart what you did because there was so much mastery in that and experience and repetition that you've executed on. For someone to hear that, they either need to listen to it over and over again and memorize exactly what you did, or they've got to understand what you did inside of that to execute on it, right? So one of the things to think about is what are the questions that we ultimately want to ask that this consultation-based conversation would resolve, right? Or that this would naturally be the progression from that question. And that's a way to kind of start thinking about it. And so one of the things I thought about is, Marcus, based on where your business is now, right, and the trajectory that you're on, is there anybody in your organizational model that you're missing to be able to achieve your goals this year, right? Or based on the conversation we had, in looking at your organizational model early on and where you will be when we finish the year, right? Are there any gaps in your model that we should be identifying candidates and KPAing individuals for at this time to be able to fulfill your organization? Right? Simple questions like that become triggers for how do I construct an entire conversation to get to that question so that then we can have, right, the appointment. And you did it so well. It was such a natural way of communicating that if we're going to think through, okay, how can I show up like Marcus? Asking that question or having the end point can help us be able to get to that, right, in the conversation to be able to move forward from there. So those are some simple things, right? Or another way of looking at it could be the opposite, which is, let's just imagine you had a big team already and you weren't achieving your goals or doing what you wanted. We might ask a question like, Marcus, is there anybody in your team, respectfully, that you feel it'll be important to top grade, right? Or to identify another candidate for a certain role that will allow you to go from where you are to where you desire to be, right? And that could be another style of that conversation, more pain-based perhaps, and yet another way internally. Does that make sense?
Totally makes sense. This is really the beauty of the internal conversation. And most of us have read the book, Five Levels of Leadership by John Maxwell.
Mhm.
It's more than likely when you're opening that conversation with someone within your organization, you're already on a higher level of leadership.
Okay.
That if you've done a good job as a leader, you can have those difficult conversations if there is no positive note to lead on, right? You can
Yep.
go right into that. Hey, I noticed that your production decreased by 25% last month.
Yeah.
Let's get together and talk about that. If you're not already on at least the third or fourth level of leadership with someone, then that conversation does not go well, right? But if you're
Yeah.
doing your job as a leader and showing up regularly, they're going to instantly be like, man, thanks so much for reaching up. Yeah, I got a problem within my organization. I need to chat through it. Will you help
Yeah.
me?
Yeah. Now you talked a lot about the internal conversation, and you modeled for us a really great way to get to this consulting conversation. What's different about an external conversation, or how you make the call to a recruit, Marcus?
Yeah, no, I think that's a great question. I mean, there's a lot of similarities to it in that we're following that same path of trying to identify what their goals are, how they're doing in relation to those goals, what may be missing, so we can identify. It's almost like a mini needs analysis in that conversation. One of the biggest difference from my perspective in that conversation is the lead in to the conversation, because for a lot of those people, I already don't have that same leader student type relationship.
Mhm.
So the stronger I can create that pre-conversation, and this actually goes back to the days that you used to coach me, is something
Oh,
you used to say is a great front conversation eliminates any back conversation, right?
sure. Yep.
And so here it's like really identifying what are the things that I can learn about this person prior to making the connection that are going to help me close the gap quicker, to make
Mhm.
them open to letting me step into that permission type leadership in that moment, to invite them or move towards a people assessment conversation. So a lot of times we use very similar things as leaning on our ALC to try to get referrals. If we can get a referral with someone, we're going to have a much better way to connect with them.
Yep.
The other couple strategies that we use within our organization is we every month pull every single agent within our organization that closed over $1 million in volume, and we reach out specifically to every one of those, and then we track how many months in a row we reached out to that person and start saying things like, "Man, Matt, congratulations! This is the third month in a row I'm reaching out to you to congratulate you." As you can imagine, there's not very many agents in our market that are closing over $1 million a month, let alone doing it 3 times in a month. The other thing is, one of our big targets right now is growing market share. We know we grow market share by listing, so we consistently call all the top listing agents within our marketplace every single month. And so those are our conversations where I can lead in, congratulate them, ask them about their success, move into the challenges specifically with the changing landscape, and then I move into almost a very similar conversation to what we modeled before. They're now sharing, we've made that connection, and we're moving into an invitation for a people assessment.
The only other thing before we move forward that struck me in that conversation you just went through, Marcus, is that one of the market centers in the Utah region last month had a good month. They got into business with 13 agents, right? And I think you're pretty familiar with that market center.
I am,
What's interesting, or a way that we could make that outbound call, is that what I think about is Gary Keller teaches us that agents have a lead generation problem, right? Or they have a lead conversion problem. And if we could argue, perhaps it is at the highest level of lead conversion, they go into, right, an organizational issue where the conversion happens outside of them, right? And so in thinking about that, when you have an organization that brings on 13 associates, several of them are probably going to be a newer associate, right, or a lesser producing agent, possibly, right? So an outbound call could sound something like, "Hey, Marcus, it's Matt with Keller Williams. And the reason for my call is that our organization got into business with 13 agents last month." Now, why that's so important to an agent like yourself is we know that agents really have 2 problems in their business. Fundamentally, it's lead generation or lead conversion. And for somebody like yourself, it's not just lead conversion for your business. It's you're generating more leads than you can actually convert yourself. It's how do you teach other people how to do that? And how do you get the right people to convert those leads? What we do in our organization is we take many of those lesser producing agents or new agents and provide them the opportunity to join a team. And I was just wondering if you'd love to be able to interview some of those candidates for the growth of your business.
Yeah, that sounds amazing.
Excellent. Let's get together for about 30 minutes. Maybe it'll take 45 minutes. And there's a conversation I think could be really powerful around the people you're in business with in your organizational model that I'd like to have with you to be able to analyze, right? Do we have the right people in the right seat? And then to share with you a tool that we use within our organization to be able to identify someone's behavior, see if they're in the right seat, and make the most powerful hires to be able to move forward in our organization. So is 1:30 or 2:30 better for you?
Let's do 1:30.
Marcus, in an organization like yours, right? One of yours, right? Your multiple organizations you're a part of that brings on 13 people, that can be a powerful conversation to do this. So let's move forward. Now we're looking at inside the needs analysis here, right? And this is really just, we kind of said, in case of an emergency, break glass, right? Like what if you had 8 appointments back to back, and I know you've been in that situation where you've kind of been running all over the place, and maybe it's Zoom calls today, and your preparation's there, and yet you're thinking to yourself, how do I have a powerful conversation in the needs analysis that's consistent with so many people? Or how do I make sure that I recenter myself and have a simple conversation? We talked about these 4 questions could be a way to do it. Here's my question for you. Where does this assessment live? Inside of these questions, inside this overall needs analysis, this overall consulting conversation or appointment that we're having with a Keller Williams agent or a recruit, where does this people assessment live with inside these questions?
I'm not sure I understand your question.
Well, let me ask a clarifying question for you, Marcus, which is, if you were going to have the people assessment, right, with someone, and you were going to go through these 4 questions, right, where would it show up? What question would you find that you would start getting the information where you would realize, or you'd have enough information to be able to identify this is the right time or this is the right place to be able to utilize the people assessment?
Oh, yeah, got it. Sorry. So that's a great question. So as soon as I start identifying, or as soon as they start bringing to the surface their existing needs, whether it's I need more time,
Yeah.
I have too many leads within my organization right now. Soon as those needs are surfaced, then I can start identifying and saying, okay, if they feel like they don't have enough time, they feel like they need too many leads that they can service, then there's a pain point within their business that they can't do it all on their own.
Got it.
When that comes to the surface, then I identify, okay, we need to move into the people assessment conversation.
So simply put, the MREA book tells us when we're doing all we can do, we hire administrative help. And what you're listening for is, has this agent reached a level when they're doing all they can do?
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay. So let's model this back and forth really quick, and we'll kind of go fast through this because there's a lot in this conversation to go through. And remember, if you're, Marcus and I went through a preparation call and conversation around this, and there's so much to go through that we stumbled in where we put this conversation. So that's why we role play. That's why you do this. If you're sitting at home going, man, I'm watching this live, right? I got a little confused, whatever it is, throw it into Slido. Let's make sure that we have that too for you. So let's walk through this, Marcus, to make sure that everybody's understanding what we're saying. First of all, we're now in the appointment, right? We're now in the consultation. We're now in the needs analysis with the recruit, right? Second of all, there's this concept of going 3 deep. And all it really means is asking multiple questions, right? Making sure that we get enough information. You said earlier, right? Digging for the information that matters is what the words that you use. So it might sound something like, what are your goals? What are your personal goals? What additional goals do you have? Is there debt that you're looking to pay off, or investments that you're looking to fund, or places that you're looking to go or travel this year when, quarantine is lifted and you're able to do that more confidently? Great. Why are those goals important to you? And what do you get when that occurs? Why is that important to you? And ultimately, what do you get when that occurs? Marcus, thanks so much for sharing that with me. We know that our environment has to support our goals in order for us to be successful. Do you agree with that?
Absolutely.
Great. So since you agree with that, and maybe it could even be said that as much as 80% of our environment, right, of our success, is based upon the environment that we're in. I'm curious, what is it about your current environment that's not conducive to your future success?
Well, one of the things I found is that in my current environment, there's not very many agents within my current office that are producing to the level I am. So I'm having a hard time connecting with people on the same level that I am of knowing where to go.
Okay, great. So one of the things I hear you saying is that use a football reference, you've outkicked your coverage. You're in a spot where you're out alone, right? You've out achieved or you've outproduced everyone within your organization, and there's really nobody that asks for help. Okay. When you look at your business, I know, a lot of people in the real estate business talk about 36 transactions as kind of the point that you make hires and you do that. Obviously that's going to be dependent upon the individual. And yet, Marcus, you're at a point where your business is at 50 transactions and you don't have anybody in your team yet. So great job, really figuring out a way to make things work. And yet, are you feeling any pressure of needing leverage or needing help in your business?
Yeah, I mean it's a lot of work. I work a lot of hours, and my clients count on me to do it.
Yeah. We hear a lot of agents like yourself inside our organization. They're always looking for more money in their pocket, right? If they can make it and to be able to grow and more importantly, to spend more time with their family. Are those things important to you?
Yeah, absolutely.
So I hear you working a lot of hours, and so your time with your family is down. Is that right?
Yeah, I'd like to spend more time with them for sure.
Okay. So let's take a look at something together, right? And let's just go a little deeper in this conversation, if that's okay. What I'd like for you to do on the paper that you have in front of you is go ahead and draw out your current organizational chart. Okay. Now we're going to stop there. And yet, does that make sense? Is that kind of a way that we would get into this conversation, or where that conversation could be placed in a basic needs analysis with a recruit?
Yeah, I think that's, I mean, obviously masterfully done by you. And I think the one of the critical pieces of that is the 3 deep conversation, right? That those going 3 deep, and we can't rush this process.
Yeah.
So we can't move to the next question. We can't go from 1 to 2 until we've properly flushed out 1. The way I kind of explain to it is people are preconditioned to be in self-defense mode, right? Yeah. Generally speaking, that first answer they give you is their hands are up like this. It's like, I'm giving you an answer to get you to move on. But that second, when you re-ask the same question, they're kind of dropping their dukes a little bit. By the third time, their hands are all the way down here. They're in less defense mode, and their brain's saying, like, I've already given them the first 2 preconditioned answer. Let me open up a little bit more. As people open up, they start to feel a kind of connectivity with the person, and you're moving through those levels of leadership, where by the time you get to number 3, you've understood why is this important to them on a deeper level. Now they're going to really open up to say, this is where my business really is. Like, I can't tell you how many times I get into recruiting appointments, and initially everyone wants to tell me how incredible and wonderful their business is top to bottom, which there are things to celebrate in everyone's business, but everyone's not really anxious to share with you the pain points in their business until you earn the right to hear those pieces, which is why it's so critical to do that 3 deep conversation, get their dukes down. They're going to open up, and that's where the consultant really gets to thrive.
Yeah, I was taught by a great leader that people live in a positive present the vast majority of the time. And our responsibility is to help them become consciously aware as to the things that they're not happy with, and as this page says, the gaps that exist between where they are currently and the goals that they desire to achieve. Now, sometimes we call that a negative present, right? Understanding, having awareness of where they are in comparison to where they desire to be, and it not being where they want to be. Really aggressive leaders will ask a recruit a question like, what brought you in today? And that's a great way to really get straight to the conversation of, you're here for a reason, because you didn't just show up, right? What is it, right, that we're here to talk about that's not working for you that we can move your business forward in, right? Now, that's kind of, we did some role modeling, we did some role playing. One of the biggest things that I know both of us believe in is doing this with other people. And so when you're watching this live or you're watching this back later, what we're going to challenge you to do is, who's your script practice partner? Who's your role play partner? Who's that high level team leader, that high level leader, right, in your region or in your market center or your local area, or even nationally based on this platform, right? We can go anywhere in the world that you're consistently practicing this with, so it becomes second nature and natural and organic in your communication, right? Can you get to the Jason Abrams level of business fluency, right? Of it just coming right through. Looking at this though, Marcus, let's think about one other thing. What's different, the way that we get to this conversation with an internal agent or with a Keller Williams agent, right? Think about consulting really quickly in a minute or so. Is there anything that's different, or there's something else, a different way to think about how to get to the people assessment with a Keller Williams agent, with one of those top 20% agents?
I mean, realistically, for me, the beautiful thing about with the top 20% in your market center is this is not a one-time conversation. If you're really in a relationship with those top people, this is an ongoing conversation that you've already opened the conversation. You don't have to do the whole pre-conversation every time. It's you're already in relation. You know what their goals are. We're tracking and measuring where they're at in relation to their goals. I mean, a lot of times it's you start the conversation internally at number 3, and sometimes you have to remind them their answers in number 2, because you're already there. As you're saying, hey, where are you at? How are things going? We're already at this level of relationship that I can ask the questions. If they start giving me justification answers, then I can take them back to number 2 to say, hey, remember why you told me your goals were important? And then we move back to number 3 of now let's talk again about where your business is. And then we can identify the gaps, if that makes sense. So this is, even though they're numbered 1, 2, 3, 4 here, internally, we've got, as a consultant, we've got to know how to shift back and forth between the process and the order of them.
Well, that was masterfully said. What I heard you say is that if you have a 411, you're starting basically with reporting numbers and where their business is now. And as long as they have progression, you maybe get into a people assessment or another consulting conversation to move forward to identify or close another gap. And if they're giving justification or excuses or reason, you're going to go back to motivation and the why to expose that again and move them forward. That's really important. So
one quick comment with that too, Matt. I think the better we do that internally, it's going to give us really ammunition for those external conversations, because then we can say, do you know Matt Teter in my office? Yeah, I coach Matt on a regular basis. These are the type of conversations we have specific to his business, almost on a weekly or a monthly basis. And you can see what he's done with his organization. He's gone from X to Y by this time.
Yeah.
And then you can move into, if they identify, and we're going to talk a little bit about this now, if they identify as to say, yes, I need a shift in my organizational chart, they can say, hey, I want to get on the same path as you're on with Matt Teter. Can you coach me on a regular basis to get me to this result?
So some of the, now we're going to talk about mapping the organization and drawing it out, right? And yet some of the things that you're saying, right, are, it's based on the questions that we ask to identify that this people assessment becomes important, right? And then you're saying that your internal consulting conversations become objection handlers, scripts, or dialogues that you have with people outside the organization, and sharing and telling stories to cause them to buy into this model, or to make the decision, or to relate or connect with you as a leader to say, you know what, maybe I don't know Marcus that well, and yet I know Matt, or I know somebody else. And if this is what's really working for their business, and I've seen that work for them, this may be something that works for me. So okay, this kind of begins this people assessment. And again, Jason does it masterfully. There's a series of videos on all these assessments and consultation conversations under the Leadership Tech Guide on KW Connect. And yet we start by drawing an organizational chart, right? And we kind of go through and say, okay, go ahead and draw your organizational chart. We're going to map their organization. And the example that's on the screen here is pretty common, right? However, sometimes it won't even look that well organized to start, even though that's not a perfect by model organizational chart. So we're going to have them draw that out and kind of go through that. When you think about Marcus, there's a series of questions that we wrote down, and maybe you have those about all 7 levels, right? And we kind of wrote down like by level, right? Each question that we would ask, right? To be able to identify where they would be or could be as we draw out their organization and where they're thinking. Can you run through those? Level 1, level 2. KWU helped us to, develop these. And I think these are really good questions for us to identify and think about as we go through an organizational model and do this people assessment.
Yeah, no problem. So level 1 is, do you want to run a practice or a business? And I love this question because I think it's really important. Everyone considers themselves, oh, I run a real estate. I'm a business owner, yet they're not. A lot of them aren't running like a business owner. So this is an easy way to open the conversation of, okay, help me start thinking like a business owner.
Yep.
Level 2, do you have anyone that helps you? What do they do? Basically leaning on the administrative piece. Level 3, are you leveraging your lead administrator? Level 4, do you show homes to buyers? Level 5, do you go on listing appointments? Level 6, do you have or want to build an expansion team? And level 7, do you have or want to have a CEO that is not you?
Yeah. If you're going to go back and watch this recording, right, or if you're looking to write something down, and you're watching this live, I'd strongly urge you to write those down, right, and to go back and watch that, because it's a great way to think through. By the way, if you could write down those 7 questions and have them next to you on a mega agent, right, recruiting appointment, or working with one of your internal agents, top 20% ALC, and when you drew their organizational chart where it is today, you mapped their organization and you saw this, you'd be triggered to know that your questions are level 3 or 4, and a combination of both to help them reorganize or think through this possibly in a different way so you can move them forward. So speaking of moving forward, let's look at the organizational model, this simplified organizational model that we have today within Keller Williams. Marcus, in our preparation call for this, yesterday, we talked through the fact that for you and I, this broken down model has been one of the most powerful things that we've experienced, because previously we didn't have the simplification of these labels. And so just take a minute and explain, the 3 sections and how this helps you as a consultant to teach people how to think about their organization.
Yeah. And one of the reasons this breakdown between these 3 sections is so critical to me is I would often get to this point in the people assessment, and I would instantly start drawing out what their team should look like. Not they showed me what it does look like, and my mind would just be like, well, we've got the answer to that. Let me draw out what the organizational chart should look like for you. Well, instantly, all the work I had done over the previous 30 minutes with them kind of went out the window, because I just said, hey, we've been building this relationship. You're wrong. Look what's right.
Sure.
And this idea of breaking it into the 3 sections allows me to show them what portions of their organizational chart are right.
Yeah.
And helps them say, because even though we've got the model of exactly what it should look like, there's some minor changes that can happen within those. The things that should remain consistent across all organizational charts is there should be a specific portion that focuses on lead generation. There should be a specific portion that oversees the operations. And there should be a specific portion that operates the sales contract to close. And so the idea behind this is I can break down the categories and say, now let's overlap your organizational chart the way you drew it here. And now they're starting to see the gaps of saying, like, man, I've built a whole organization that covers some operation and sales, but nothing really that focuses on managing the lead generation portion of it. I've been leaning on my sales department to do that. And then it accelerates our conversation instead of putting the brakes on it by simply having these 3 categories.
Yeah, what's so amazing about what you just said, you did a really good job explaining that, is the only thing to add or to summarize there is that this breakdown, this visual provides questions for you to ask in consulting or recruiting. Questions like, right, so who's responsible for lead generation within your organization right now, right? Who leads your operations team, and what specifically do they do, right? I love that level 3 question that you just asked a few moments ago, which is, right, do you have leverage for your lead administrator, right? That's a really good question. We know that the second administrative hire is a lot of a sticking point in the growth of an agent's business, right? And then we look at sales, who's responsible for selling real estate, for showing homes? That was another question that you asked at that level 4 question there. So it gives you trigger points for those questions. It helps you think about it. And I love what you said. When you draw out their model and then you look at this, right, it gives you the ability to say, it doesn't make them wrong. It's, well, what if we thought about it this way? What if we looked at it this way? Again, Jason does a masterful job in talking through how to do this. We're just looking at it from the same concept, slightly different perspective of helping you think through how to execute on this, right, to move forward. So
one quick comment with that,
yeah, go ahead.
Is I'm in conversation with one of the top non-KW teams in the state of Utah right now, and we've been doing a people assessment over Zoom this last week. And one of the interesting things I did after the fact is as he was talking, I was drawing out his organizational chart as he outlined it to me. We talked through it. And then after our call, I actually had my marketing team put together, draw up the organizational chart, branded all KW. And one thing I sent over is his name was on multiple pieces of the organizational chart. which was an aha for him. At that time, he was like, we're doing awesome. This is all great. As he got that organizational chart that he told me how to draw it, and his name was on a lot of it, that was his aha. Is like, man, yeah, this is what my organizational chart should look like, but my name should not be in as many spots as it is here. And it was just a really interesting part of that conversation for a higher level team to say, man, I'm wearing way too many hats within my organization. We need to keep talking.
Absolutely. So here we are with the 7 levels, right? Now, this is available in that content that's covered, from Jason, right? We go through these models in our MAPS models course. It's available in multiple places from KWU. Obviously, we have this opportunity to be able to see this in the leverage series and career visioning as well, to go through this in these 7 levels. I have a curiosity-based question for you, Marcus, as we look at this, because we're really just directing people where to go and what to look for here. And you gave them those questions. You've talked about how to do that, and we give them the resources. We keep moving forward. My question for you is, from a recruiting perspective, because you've done so much of it, has anybody ever walked into your office with a 5th level team from outside our organization?
Never.
And you have 3 market centers.
Yep.
And you're an OP, and you've been a team leader before.
Yep.
And you have a sales team, so you talk to a lot of agents, and you've never met somebody when did you start as a leader?
2015.
Okay, so in 5 years, with that many people, that many thousands of conversations, nobody's met with you where you've seen that from outside our organization.
Nope.
Why do you think that is as we move forward?
I think people get to a point where they just keep adding people, and there's no organization to it. It's called an organizational chart for a reason. And people think I need to grow my team, I just need to keep adding people, and they're not shifting and changing the organizational model. So a lot of people, they end up getting maybe 1 or 2. I mean, the truth of the matter is most people hire wrong from day one, where they start hiring a buyer's agent instead of an administrative piece. But even if they get those first couple pieces right of having a strong administrative team, they just keep adding on to what they've done in the past instead of reorganizing and creating a new linear chain of command. It's because they haven't had the right coach in their life to help them see a new way.
When I heard you say it's 3 unique value propositions, or what Gary would say, disruptive value propositions that we have at Keller Williams, one of them is kind of interesting because it's so fundamental. It's one of our models, which is having an organizational model, having a model to follow, like we just went through the 7 models. The second thing that I heard you say, right, and what we're going to right now, right, is the KPA. Having a tool that's a human resources style behavioral assessment that allows you to be able to make the best decisions and then bring talent into your organization and helping setting them up for success with the rest of the leverage series to be able to functionally operate and successfully operate within their role. And the third thing I heard you say is that having a coaching organization that's integrated in partnership, right, within that organization or within our company with MAPS, that understands that and can hold you accountable, capable, able to execute on it by asking the questions and moving you forward. So when we think about, those are 3 disruptive value propositions or unique value propositions that exist at Keller Williams that you just kind of organically said, well, here's why I see the difference. And sometimes we don't pause for a moment and go, whoa, that's a big difference. We don't see that externally. And we kind of want to overcomplicate what's necessary to cause someone to see the value within our organization. Now that can happen internally too, and people can be distracted by that. Let's talk about the KPA, right? We're going to invite the agent to take the KPA and schedule a follow-up consultation. For the people assessment, internally we're doing this, externally we're doing this. There's 2 versions of the KPA. There's a personal fit, which is kind of like a short form version. It's really designed a lot for recruiting for a lot of people. However, I'm partial to the job fit, and the job match, the longer form, so to speak, with just a little bit longer form of the KPA. Tell me about this, inviting the agent to take the KPA. Where does that happen, and how does the KPA solidify that consulting or recruiting relationship?
Yeah, this is a great question. I think it takes some time to learn the finesse of when does the KPA enter the conversation. From my perspective, in the people assessment piece, the most opportune time is when you've got them leaning into the conversation saying, okay, yes, there needs to be some shifts to my organizational chart. This is the opportune time, specifically with that mega agent, to say, Now, if we're going to make some changes within your organization, and I assume that you want top level talent in each role within your organization, do you agree? They're going to say yes.
Yes.
And then I'm going to go into, wouldn't it make sense then to walk through and really understand how you're wired and understand better how you operate as a leader so that you can be the leader you need to be for every person within this organization, as I'm pointing to every circle on the organizational chart. So part of this process starts with you, of us better understanding, how do you tick? How do you make decisions? How do you lead? So that as we identify the missing persons within your organization, we can make sure you're showing up as the leader you need to be to take your organization to the next level. And then I'll introduce the KPA at that point, and they'll be excited about taking it, because now they're seeing themselves as on a journey to grow personally, other than just saying like, I need to go fill these holes.
Same conversation for recruit, same conversation for consulting. And I love that, right? To be able to do that. So here's what we've done so far up to this point. What we did is, we made a call. We made a call to an internal agent. We made a call to a recruit, and it was positioning a value proposition that was leading them to a place where the answer to what we're asking them, the answer to what we would cover in the appointment, would be talking about their people, their organization. Then what we did is we had a needs analysis, right? We had 4 simple questions, and we looked to identify where would these assessments go? Where do they fall? Where do they exist or live inside that recruiting conversation or that consulting conversation? And I love what you said so well. With a consulting conversation, an internal agent, it's exactly the same as a recruit the first time. As you move forward in the future, you go to step 3, you kind of jump forward to that 3rd question. And with the recruit, you're going to go through everything. And it's going to live inside that where's your business now, right, conversation, and move them forward and close those gaps. Then what we did is we went through what Jason's taught us, what the videos have taught us, right, drawing out the organizational chart, looking at what it would look like with us. And one of your key insights was sending people a follow-up email that said, here's your name and all these key roles, right? I love that. And then, what we've done is we invited them to take the KPA. And exactly what you said is, hey, if we're going to build your organization or, with a high performance team, wouldn't it make sense to understand your own behavior first and how you operate, how you're wired, how you tick, to be able to identify other people and go forward from there and build this high performance team. Let's have you experience it so that you can see how powerful this tool is. So you're excited to use that with other people. No different for a consulting conversation or recruiting conversation. Works perfectly. And that job match, the longer form, so to speak, of the KPA is a great thing to do, because that's really what they're going to do to hire for their team too, to get that full experience. And then finally, we're going to invite them into a consulting relationship. Basically, for an internal agent on a consistent basis, hey, let's have this conversation over and over, right? Let's schedule this every other week or every week. Here's your homework that you're going to do, and this is what we're going to look at. I'm going to be asking you questions about where we are in the process, how many KPAs that you've ordered for this role you're hiring for, and we're going to hold you accountable, capable, able to make the best hire, right, through that process to be able to grow your organization and then move forward from there, maybe 30, 40, maybe to technology or from something from there. And in recruiting, it's kind of that's a conversion conversation. Hey, what would it look like if somebody was in your world having conversations like this on a weekly basis or bi-weekly basis, and you were surrounded by top performers that had this conversation, this drive, and these tools, right? What would that look like for you? Would this clarity help your business grow and allow you to achieve your goals? Great, let's get started. So we're here to close for the relationship. You and I, we know, and if we don't know, the MCA absolutely is trained on this in many trainings to send the invitation for the KPA, right? And to get that out on the steps in the process of doing it. Here's the one thing that I wanted to get to, Marcus, is we've got this Command for Market Center pipeline. And this is a conversation that is totally new, for 2020, right? And where we are. So what do we do with this, right? We're really talking about recruiting again. We've gone through the people assessment. We invited the consistent consultation. Maybe we're in a follow-up process and they haven't said yes to Keller Williams yet. What are we doing with Command for Market Center, and how is this a powerful tool?
Yeah, I think this is a really important part, particularly because the level of conversation that we're requiring from our leaders is a much higher conversation, and our time is valuable. So we just spent a lot of time and energy building a relationship with somebody, And it's kind of like when you buy a brand new car, the minute you drive it off the lot, that immediately starts to depreciate. Same thing with these conversations. You've just built a relationship with someone where they're leaning in, they're excited about it. But the minute they walk out of your office, they're going to start declining. The value of that conversation is going to start to go and decline. And if we don't have a system in place to keep bumping them back up and reminding them the power of that conversation, that our probability of getting in business with that person, or the probability of them coming prepared for that next conversation, is significantly decreasing moment by moment. This is the power of command. It's the same thing we teach our agents is relationship is not a one-time thing. Relationship is an ongoing piece. And the power of command, particularly now the leadership side of command, is saying, what are the specific activities that must happen on my side, both systematically and through my energy and effort, that are going to continue to maintain and nurture this relationship, that we're going to move towards a higher probability of getting into business where I can continue to be a leader for this person.
So basically what I hear you saying is we're modeling the behavior of success to our people in the same way that they utilize command. We're going to get in here. We're going to update our pipeline and command for Market Center, right? Just like they would add, right, someone to their database or a contact to their database. We're adding somebody to our pipeline. And most importantly, we're recording those key notes and the status of the recruit and utilizing that for a couple things. Number one, success leaves clues. So as we convert people, that becomes the nature or the foundation of that follow-up system or touch system or plan that we're going to utilize with everybody. The second thing is we're looking for trends or patterns. So as we put notes right in and we're looking at those, right, they're going to key certain things into us as we see a lot of that, or we're going to say, oh, this could be a great class for this person, or you know what, I didn't talk about Keller offers or Keller mortgage or Keller covered, right, or the consumer application with this individual. That's a great follow-up conversation. Or maybe I could do the tech assessment next, right, to be able to do that. So this is the way that we stay on top of that and we keep moving forward. So here's where we are. We talked about it. We're gonna integrate the consulting conversations just like you taught us in the needs analysis. Consult an agent in the Market Center on the organization using the people assessment. We gave several different ways to get in that conversation and execute on that. And then invite Red 2 agents, right? Those producers of 8 or more transactions, those capping agents, right, into a consulting conversation. And the whole call, Marcus, we've been talking about these resources, right, that are in the Leadership Tech Guide, where Jason is talking about this and the people assessment. So finally, the last point that's made on this slide that's important to make is making an accountability plan, setting a goal with your coach, right? So let's just say, you go to your MAPS coach and you say, I'm going to make a commitment to do 10 people assessments in the month of June with Red 2 agents, right? I'm going to make a commitment to do, 12, to do 15, to do 20, whatever that number is, right? Let's make a commitment and let's get into that activity both internally and externally as much as possible so that we have that business fluency, so to speak. We're able to execute it at the level that you can, that Jason Abrams can as well, and have your MAPS coach help you. In summarizing all this today, Marcus, and thinking through this entire conversation, what do you have to add or how would you kind of tie this all together?
Yeah, I would just in summary, I would say that from my perspective, there's never been a more exciting time to be a leader within our organization. The truth is the majority of us were attracted to a leadership position within Keller Williams for specifically what this conversation models: connectivity. It's all about saying, how can we be a leader to someone to help them identify where they currently are in relation to where they currently want to go. Learning how to have this conversation, in essence, all we're doing is helping them build a bridge from their current reality to where they want to go. And again, this is the reason the majority of us were attracted to leadership, was to facilitate these conversations. And it's a battle cry to some extent of it's our responsibility, it's our obligation to grow our leadership, to be able to have this conversation at a high level more often. And if we do so, nobody will have a bigger impact on the real estate industry than the leaders that are going to be watching this call.
And what I heard you say is it's really about the time on task of learning it as well throughout the call, right? Role play it, practice it, get an accountability partner with your MAPS coach on how you're going to execute this, right? And make sure that's something that you're committed to moving forward. And most importantly, just start with the simple thing, which is jump onto kwconnect.com, check out Jason's videos, download the resources, and begin the learning process to be able to execute on this. It's It's a powerful conversation, and there's no way that somebody builds a world like yours, 3 market centers and a sales team in our organization. And we're so proud to be in business with you at Keller Williams without understanding these simple, fundamental conversations like this. Well, on behalf of MAPS Coaching and KWU and our awesome partnership that we have together, and I'm Matt Teter, the Director of Leadership Coaching. Marcus, thank you so much for everything that you covered today. That was a wealth of knowledge in a short period of time. People may need to go back and watch this a couple times to take it all away. And we appreciate you and wish you continued success in your leadership growth and development throughout Keller Williams.
Awesome. Thanks so much for having me. Appreciate you.
Thanks so much.